Hey guys, how are you doing today? We're back again. This is our second time doing this, and I'm really excited. Good afternoon, and welcome everybody for joining us. I'd like to begin by recognizing that Manitoba Music was founded on Treaty One territory, which is the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And I'd like to recognize a strong Inuit community here in Manitoba. Manitoba Music respects the treaty in which our organization resides, and we commit to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in the spirit of collaboration and reconciliation. My name is Alex Shani. Again, I'm the Industry Development Coordinator here at Manitoba Music, and we're here for part two of our rights management series. So today we're joined with Stephen Carroll, Mike Duboff, and Brian Pascoe. The last two are lawyers from Edwards Creative Law, and Stephen Carroll is the Music Programs Director at MFM. This, like I said, is the second session of our music rights management series, and we've been doing it so far last week. We're doing it again today, part two, and we're going to be coming up part three next week. We're streaming live to Facebook and YouTube, so we're happy that everybody can be here. And this presentation is part of our MusicWorks initiative. MusicWorks are sessions that are designed to help equip artists with skills and tools and information they need to help them organize, establish, and grow their music as a business. So today, part two, the music rights management series is focusing on organizations and registrations. And for more information about the rights management series or any of the MusicWorks stuff, you can go check us out at manitobamusic.com/workshops, and you can get all the information there. If you have any questions for any of the speakers during the presentation, be sure to put it in the comment section and I will make sure to get it to them. They should be able to see it too and they can answer it. But other than that, we're moving on to organizations and registrations. With all that introduction done, I'd like to introduce our three guests today. So with that, we're going to have Stephen, Michael, and Byron. If you guys could take time to just introduce yourself. Stephen, why don't you go first?
Hi, thanks, Alex. Thank you, Manitoba Music, for putting this on. I'm the Director of Music Programs at Manitoba Film Music, your neighborhood music industry funding association here in Manitoba, supporting the industry through grants for recording, touring, video production, marketing, and as well as business development. We've been around since 1986, funding over probably 10,000 recordings now, or somewhere at that number, and tens of thousands of tour dates for Manitoba artists across the globe. And part of my job, I have an interest and a passion in neighboring rights, royalties, and the back end of the music business, which we're going to dig into today. So yeah, thanks, Alex.
Perfect. Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Alex and Stephen, for having us once again this week. My name's Mike Duboff. I'm an entertainment lawyer. I've been practicing in this area for roughly 3 years or so, but I'm born and raised. I'm from Winnipeg myself, so familiar with the scene like you and Stephen yourselves, and I've been around the block there. I've seen all the venues and everything, so I'm happy to kind of get back connected with you guys and everything the city has to offer, and excited to talk with you guys today.
Sweet. Very sweet. And finally, Byron, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Thanks, Alex. So my name is Byron Pascoe. I'm an entertainment lawyer with Edwards Creative Law, which we call Canada's entertainment law boutique. And you can see my handle there, Edwards Creative Law, to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, etc. So I'm an entertainment lawyer, but my focus definitely is music, which I've been doing for the last number of years, working with producers, performers, writers, managers, companies, a lot in the hip hop genre and other genres as well, working with clients across Canada, and involved in the scene generally of ensuring that musicians understand their rights and are familiar with legal implications of the arrangements they enter into. And all of us here are about education and professional development. So happy to be here for the second session of the series.
Perfect. Okay, so last week we covered music agreements in the law. This week we're going to be talking about organizations and registration, and Stephen is going to be kicking it off, and Byron and Mike are going to be making sure they add to the conversation. Again, if you guys have any questions, we got some great questions last time, make sure you put it in the chat, I'm going to dip off the screen right now, and I'm going to let these guys get to it, but it's going to be a great presentation. Thank you again for joining us, and take it away, guys.
Great. So we're going to have a little PowerPoint, which we're going to run through to keep the discussion going. Thank you, Isabella. We're going to look at a lot of the different categories of the rights. Last week, we looked at the various roles and the rights that those roles have, or the entitlements that those roles have to receive remuneration in different forms, and the various kind of split scenarios that can happen. We today are going to dig in a little bit on the next phase. So what you do when, let's say you've played on a record, you've released a record, you've written a song, etc. So all the various scenarios here. Maybe you produced a track, you maybe made a beat that's on a track. All the various roles, with them come affiliated royalty rights. And this is generally the list. This is what we're going to be discussing. It's going to come up a couple times over the discussion, all these different categories. So performers, neighboring rights, owners, neighboring rights, publishing royalties, as well as we'll briefly mention private copying royalties, which are a very small amount of the giant pie that is royalties. These are the cast that are starring in this presentation today. We've got a whole list of acronyms here, and I know it's a lot of acronyms. None of us on this panel are to blame for the amount of acronyms that exist in this presentation in general, but also that govern our royalty system worldwide. So we're going to dig into each one of these categories, the general categories, but then talk specifically about these various organizations and their roles and how to properly register and what to watch out for, so that your royalties come to you and not end up in this little image here. This is the black box. This is sort of, watch out for this little item as we go through our presentation. This is the warning sign for you to be cautious, because when royalties go uncollected, they can end up in essentially what's known as a black box, lost in space, perhaps for all time. So we're hoping to help you guys avoid that. So foundational stuff we went over a little bit last week, but a royalty is earned when your music is now used in whatever format. If it's streamed, if it's sold, if it's downloaded, it's played as background music in a store, it earns revenue for you anytime. And it's never been easier to release your music. Us three today here on the panel could put together a track over the next hour and have it up distributed worldwide in a few days. It makes it really easy, but maintaining a relationship to that recording and the rights that you have to it is really tricky. Perhaps never been trickier. I don't know if the panel agrees with me, but the base of this is copyright. So we talked about this off the hop last week. There's two foundational kind of categories that we're going to look at here: publishing, which governs the composition, and the master, the recording. I don't know, Michael, Byron, do you have any comments about the beginning stages here of our dialogue?
It's a really important starting point, because whenever we're talking about the song, we are talking about these two things. We're talking about the composition, sometimes called the underlying composition, or the beat in hip hop, or the melody, the music, all of that combined, that's the composition, whereas the recording of that composition is something else. And the related point is that for every recording there's a composition, but for every composition there may be no recordings, one recording, or many hundreds or thousands of recordings. So again, great starting point: the composition and the recording, two separate parts. Both are needed for a song to be exploited and used, but they are separate elements of the song.
Great. So in Canada we're pretty lucky. We generally have copyright here, and it's somewhat protected. We'll disagree probably, or some will disagree about how effective our system is, but we do have copyright law. So in Canada, it's fairly easy to have your copyright granted for you. And maybe we'll talk briefly about, how do we establish that early control of the copyright for our recording? What do you guys do generally to advise your clients? I'm aware that you can, in Canada, the copyright is granted as soon as you affix the composition. That's the first, generally when the song begins its lifespan, it gets created. usually on the couple instruments. Maybe you're doing it in the box in the computer, making your beats or whatnot. And as soon as it gets affixed and the full composition is affixed, you have copyright control in Canada. Do you guys agree with that kind of summary?
Yeah, I think that's correct. And it's something that like a lot of people don't recognize is that you don't actually need to register a work in order for the copyright to exist. The registration itself, as I think you're going to talk about in a moment, does have its advantages. You're kind of giving notice to the world of the claim you have in that piece, as well it creates a legal presumption that you are like the author or the maker or the owner of the work. But the registration is not in and of itself required to have the copyright. The copyright itself, as you said, it's a fixed expression of ideas. You can't copyright an idea, but as soon as you kind of put it into existence, whether it's like writing down lyrics or recording a song, you then thereafter have the copyright, which is like kind of an important idea to kind of understand and recognize for this conversation.
Yeah, and like the other kind of angle on how this question is asked is, how do I copyright my song? And that's probably the most common question that I get, or music lawyers in general get. And again, same concepts. You copyright a song by actually creating the song, like recording it or writing it, not just thinking of it in your head. So if you have a melody in your mind or a really strong lyric in your mind, that's not protected by copyright. What's protected by copyright is once you record it or once you write it down. That's the transition from something that's not protected to something that is protected. And once it is protected by copyright, there's certain things that you get, this bundle of rights, and you only get that bundle of rights of copyright once it's, as you put here in the slide, Stephen, it's recorded, it's transcribed, it exists, it's affixed. And that's kind of a legal jargony word, but more in practice, if you're a hip hop beat maker and you have a great kind of beat in your mind, go and make it on your console and record it. You have a digital copy of it. At that point, there's protection in that work. It's not protected when it's in your mind. It's protected when it's in your in your computer, let's say, or written down. Writing it in. Well, you're not going to write down a beat in letters, but once it's fixed in a tangible form, that's when those bundle of rights start to exist for you in that work.
Yeah, great guys. So it's very so it's kind of simple for us as Canadians. We have copyright protection based on the principles that we just discussed. The song's lifespan after this starts to get a little more complicated. Depending on how clean your copyright is. Let's just say for copyright, you have to be the sole creator, or you are in partnership with other people that are creating that work, then you're sharing the copyright. But we're not going to dig too much into that nuance, but because we kind of dug into that last week on our split sheets. So we're going to go to the next phase here of the song's lifespan. Once you put it out in the world, that's when it starts to perhaps earn money. And as soon as it earns money, people are entitled to earn portions of revenue based on their relationships, which we kind of went over last week. So there's on the publishing side, the music publishing side, which governs the composition. Just to pause there for definitions for everybody who maybe is not familiar with publishing. Music publishing refers to the kind of set of rights around and revenue that gets earned from the composition side. So the song side, not the recording side. And here, we're going to introduce our first key organization in which registrations must be completed, which is SOCAN. SOCAN governs performance royalties, which are earned when songs get played on the radio, TV, various instances, background music, as well as a mechanical royalty, which we're going to dig into in a few minutes. In Canada, the composition royalties are also governed by the CMRRA, which manages solely the mechanical royalties. And these two entities are the principal organizations in which you register to manage the publishing / composition revenue for you as a writer. Now, if you happen to own the recording, you've recorded yourself, you're self-recording, or you've created a recording that you want to sell, and in that case, the rights holders have a couple categories. So there's performers, and there's the actual owner of the recording. So the people who performed on the recording have rights under the recording stream, aka the master revenue stream. In Canada, there's several organizations which manage rights for the performers. They are MROC or RACs. So MROC or RACs or Artistes, which is based in Quebec. And that collects revenue for the performers on recordings, as well as the reproduction right, and will collect private copying. And then on the owner side, the people who own the recording, because they're not necessarily the same. The performer who played on the recording is not always, could be a session musician who's not the owner of that recording. The owner's royalties flow through a couple organizations. Connect/Resound, which are a organization which have merged recently. Resound was its separate, or entirely separate organization, but to simplify things, I'm just going to say they kind of merged. Connect will definitely probably have something to say to me about that later. And then Stop Rock, which is a Quebec-based. So we're going to help you navigate this. You're not necessarily registering for everything you're going to see here. You're going to choose which category, what your relationship is to the music. And then you're going to make your registrations. You guys have any comments on this slide?
Sure. So SOCAN is, they're all important organizations, including SOCAN. Just for some perspective, there's over 175,000 members of SOCAN, including, possibly the three of us, probably the three of us, hopefully. Yeah, me too. It's free to join. It's really easy to join. It's important to join. If you're a songwriter in any way, shape, or form, or if you're planning to be one, it's a really good starting point. Easy process that make it very simple. Encourage everybody to be a SOCAN member, and just kind of go into the website once you're a member and play with the system and learn about. You go through the steps of how to register a composition, but it's really encouraged, to be a member of SOCAN if you're a writer. CMRA, I believe, has 6,000 members or something. They may tell me I'm wrong, but I think it's around that. And they mostly work with music publishers and self-published authors. And yeah, both are important organizations. I think there's a misconception in the music ecosystem that SOCAN does everything for everybody, and as Steven's laid out here, the starting point, there's different organizations that do different things, and SOCAN does a lot, and they're great. They don't do everything. All of these organizations do a lot, but they don't do everything. And, what we'll get into is, what each of these organizations do. And, kind of the takeaway is that one doesn't do everything for everybody, but they each, play an important role.
Great. So this seems like quite a lot of info for you guys, don't worry. We're gonna break it down for you now. So keep that slide in your mind's eye. We're gonna come back to it later, and that's kind of summarizes all these organizations and their relationship with the recording and the composition. So as Byron was mentioning, SOCAN has a really strong presence in Canada, and a lot of people are aware of SOCAN. But they're not really aware actually what SOCAN does. So SOCAN's principal business day to day is collecting performance royalties for songwriters and publishers, and those performance royalties are earned every time the song is performed, including in live performance situations, which people are not aware of. So SOCAN will collect royalties for when your music is broadcast on radio, if it's used in TV, as I mentioned earlier, if it's used in background music, such as if you've ever been to a gym and they're pumping tunes, that place will have a SOCAN license. It licenses all sorts of scenarios, which come up in the next slide. But one of the key ones that they license is live performance royalties. So who is this earning money for? Okay, this is earning money for the songwriter. So we're on the composition side of this chart we kind of had earlier. So songwriters and publishers. Now, just a note on that, asterisk, if you haven't signed a deal with a publisher, you are self-published. You are a publisher. So you actually technically are in the job of managing your own publishing composition revenue. So one thing that I bring up early in this presentation right now, or we're going to bring up early, is this live performance royalty is one of the royalties a lot of people aren't aware of. So when you play your own songs live, you actually are entitled to a slice of the revenue earned from the ticket sales of that night for you, just as the songwriter, not for you as a performer. This one often gets neglected because people aren't maybe aware of it, or they're not so good at their administration, but it can be a lot of money. Up to it's around 3% of the gross ticket sales from concerts across Canada are paid to songwriters. And there's a minimum threshold. But if you've played a concert in the past, well, I guess in the past couple of years, probably not playing too many, but maybe in the past month or two, you played one, make sure you sign up you are a member of SOCAN. And if you've written the songs, that you are also submitting your set lists. Do you guys have a comment about live performance?
Yeah. And if you go onto the SOCAN website, without being a member yet, there's a whole list of all the different, what they call tariffs, that outline what the thresholds are for SOCAN to be paid and how much is paid. So, by way of an example, if you're performing at a festival, the festival is paying money to SOCAN for the entire festival, for all the songs that are being performed. And they also need to know, SOCAN needs to know what songs are being performed. So what SOCAN does is they get money from the festival and they pay money out to the writers and publishers of the songs that are performed at the festival. Sometimes there are some scenarios whereby there actually isn't a minimum ticket price because it's free, but has a variety of other factors involved. And this is the most common one. The $6 one is kind of the most common scenario, but there are other scenarios as well whereby there's money that's paid to SOCAN, and then SOCAN pays out to writers and publishers. And kind of as a brief aside, even though the last couple of years there haven't been too much in-person concerts, there's been online concerts, and SOCAN has developed a process whereby they get paid a fee. Ironically, or not, I don't know, ironically, but it's 2.99% instead of 3%. And there's a whole regime around making it, or SOCAN's goal has been to make the process of paying SOCAN for online concerts very similar to like the in-person concert scenario. And moving forward out of the pandemic, there will likely be more hybrid experiences whereby a concert you're performing at is both performed live and online, and SOCAN is on it. They have a plan, they have procedures in place to ensure that you as a writer are earning money both from the audience online and in person. And so, this slide is a whole hour presentation, and we're just kind of, talking about kind of some key takeaways, but, totally agree. There's money there in live performance. And you have to be able to have your songs registered. You have to make sure your cue sheets are submitted to SOCAN, and they have different ways of doing that are user-friendly. And you want to make sure that the venue or the promoter is actually paying SOCAN. But it's not your role as the writer to be the police of that. What you do is you tell SOCAN membership, here's where I performed, and you guys take from here. It's SOCAN's job, not your job, to make sure that the venues and events and promoters or the relevant person pays SOCAN.
Yeah. So this gets back a little bit to our presentation last week where we talked about those split sheets and establishing what portion of revenue you're going to receive from the composition side. So the split sheet governed the composition and the various amounts that the contributors were going to get. So the beat makers, the vocalists, anybody on the composition that is adding to the composition perhaps could be entitled to a slice of this royalties. And it has to be, these live performance notices have to be submitted to SOCAN for you to get that money. So there's one to think about. They have generally the capacity to go back a few years. So if you're all panicked right now, like you're thinking about a big festival you did back in 2019, you may be able to get that money still. Large shows can pay a considerable amount of money. If you've played, large festivals, sometimes your fee for performing will be less than actually what the fee will be you'll get if you're the songwriter and the performer on that show. So this is, pretty key for people who are, performing their own works. This is generally can be a big revenue generator for you. But if you are a writer on tracks and there's a big tour happening, you want to help make sure that those things get filed.
The other kind of one last comment, and I know we're kind of speaking about it, but you don't have to be the performer to earn this money. The key is that you're the writer. And so if you're a hip hop producer and you've created, the underlying beats of songs that are being performed by 10 hip hop artists who are all on tour across Canada, the United States, and, Japan and Uruguay, whatever, wherever they are in the world, there's money that you should be earning for all of those performances all around the world, and none of them are you. I mean, it'd be nice if you're there in, Japan, but you don't have to be there. You don't have to be, on stage in order to earn this money, which is, great.
We should definitely book an hour for this one. So we're going to keep rolling. We're going to breeze through these a little bit, try and keep it top level so we can get through them. So the other key category, primary business that SOCAN is undertaking is performance royalties, through broadcast. So broadcast performance royalties. I'm going to say the word performance and gets thrown a lot around in this whole presentation, and it gets a little confusing. But let's just say it summarizes whenever your music is kind of being played, whether you're playing it live, somebody else is playing it on the radio. That's what they mean by performance. So this is when performance royalties through broadcast occur when they're played on the radio and TV. And there's really a lot less work for us to do. Let's say I'm a songwriter and SOCAN member. There's a lot less work than the notice of live performance situation for the live royalties. Here, SOCAN is administering it. They have deals with radio stations to get their playlists and whatnot to administer the royalties out to those writers whose works were performed on the radio. And again, it can be pretty lucrative if you get played on national radio. These are, radio. This was a few years ago. I pulled this from SOCAN's website. The Radio 2 play for national radio, CBC radio play was $31. So that's not bad. And if you get multiple spins, it can add up to be quite a lot. If you're getting this kind of number, multiple spins on multiple radio stations, it can be quite a lot of money. Compared to college radio, the CBC, is paying, or national broadcasters are paying, 5 times the amount compared to college radio. And so there's 2 categories there called census radio. What is it? I'm losing my vocabulary here on this one. But they do various ways of calculating the amounts based on the type of tracking they're doing. So we'll just keep moving on here. Let's see what's going on here. Yeah. So now let's talk about mechanicals a little bit. So mechanicals introduces a new character here, the CMRRA. Maybe Byron, I'll throw it to you guys. Do you want to lead on mechanicals?
Sure. So the concept generally is that the composition is being reproduced, and kind of earlier on in time, most of the reproduction was a physical reproduction. So an artist is an artist or a label is having a CD manufactured 1,000 times or 2,000 times, and each time that CD is being made, there's a reproduction of the compositions happening, and a fee is paid to the publisher or to CMRA on behalf of the publisher to get the right to do that. These days, while there are still some physical albums being made by some people when they go on tour to, some genres more than others, maybe country and folk more than hip hop, most of the reproduction happens digitally. And there's a digital reproduction both when music is streamed and downloaded. And so the concept generally is that the writers and publishers of a composition should be compensated when their music is copied, reproduced, replicated, as the slide here says. And the amounts of money that are paid out really vary somewhat drastically based on how the music is ingested. As per the slide here, the 8.3 cents per download or physical sale is much more than 5% of streaming revenue. So if you think about one stream, the amount of money you'd earn from one stream is much, much, much smaller than 8.3 cents. And so there's more money made in mechanical royalties when there's a download or a physical sale. But so just to kind of bring it back to the organizations, what CMRA does, the Canadian Mechanical Reproduction Rights Association, or Musical Rights Reproduction Association, it should be called mechanical, right? But that's another. They help to collect this money when it is made available. Or they are there to collect this money in Canada from reproduction in Canada. They've recently signed a deal with the mechanical licensing MLC in the United States to be able to collect in the United States as well, and they're also connected to another organization that collects around the world. But all this to say, what you as a writer want to do, whether you're a hip hop producer or a lyricist for folk or country or everything in between, is you want to be what you can do is register as a member with CMRA, and they'll take care of all this for you. You sign up, just like with SOCAN, you sign up, it's free to sign up. You tell them what your music is, you tell them what percentage of a composition you control. And these are all really data companies. They're data companies that help to connect the dots to make sure that money that you've earned from these royalties are paid to you. And the reason why Stephen wrote CMRA or SOCAN is because SOCAN is kind of a new entrant into the game. CMRA has been around for 40 years, a very long time. SOCAN got into the mechanical royalties world a few years ago with the purchase of another company. And so you can also sign up with what's called SOCAN RR, SOCAN reproduction rights. The key takeaway, among others maybe, is that if you're a member of SOCAN, that doesn't mean you're also a member of SOCAN reproduction rights. It's not an automatic thing whereby, SOCAN represents you for both mechanical and performance royalties. So to kind of sum up, there's money that's generated, very small amounts of money, but it can add up. Small amounts of money that can add up when music that you wrote is streamed and downloaded and sold physically. And these organizations, CMRA and SOCAN RR, they help to collect that money for you, at the very least in Canada, and you can expand their mandate to collect for you outside of Canada. Neither one of them collects for the entire world. And there are ways to do that through what's called a publishing administrator who is collecting for you all over the world. But another option, especially if your music is mostly, streamed and downloaded in Canada and the United States, is to work with, for example, CMRRA to collect your mechanical royalties that are generated in Canada, the United States, and the other countries that they collect in.
Yeah, thanks, Byron. A lot of folks neglect their mechanicals. In fact, the black box that we showed you right off the hop I think it's probably at least 50% full. Maybe that's almost too high.
I don't know, but there's a lot of money. I mean, there's been articles about the hundreds of millions of dollars, American dollars. So even more, that are really people, as you say, people aren't accessing it in past because they just didn't know about it or they didn't know how. And it's a lot easier to, collect money and not leave money on the table and not have money in future go into that black box.
So there's a question in the chat. How far back can these societies collect? What I've heard from CMRA is that they can go back really far. And then SOCAN, not as much. Now, I haven't heard that from SOCAN, but that's what I've heard the talk and the banter has been. So this is this is a live event. What I like to do right about now is start to say, well, if you're a songwriter and you have music out there that's released and it's on a streaming service and you're not registered for mechanicals, that potentially that money that you're should be earning as a rights holder is going into that black box and potentially to not end up in your pocket at all. And so something to be mindful of. It's fairly simple to register these days. As Byron was mentioning, you can use direct registrations through to CMRA. You can expand your SOCAN's mandate, or you can use a publishing administrator, which we didn't really talk about. So maybe I'll pause there. A publishing administrator or publishers are there to really help manage the SOCAN royalties, your composition royalties, and your mechanical royalties, as well as to help build money We're not through other avenues such as placement in movies and TV. We're not going to really dig in on the roles of publishers here. So keep this in mind as one of the things to flag. Your performance royalties, your live performance royalties, your broadcast royalties, which generally get managed by themselves if you're set up with SOCAN, and then the mechanicals, which you may need to do a little housekeeping on. So this kind of encapsulates the publishing royalty stream that we discussed. So we're going to move over to the other side of that first slide, and we're going to start talking about the master revenue and recording related revenue. We're going to open this one up with neighboring rights royalties. So as you know, recordings earn money, as we said earlier, from royalties, and royalties are earned whenever the music is played, broadcast, sold. And generally the sales royalties are flowing through your distributors, like CD Baby, TuneCore, DistroKid, record labels, whatever you're doing, or maybe it's just flowing right to you because you're selling them cash off the side of the stage if you're old school, selling cassettes. We're not going to really dig too much into that sales royalty, that typical one that you're probably more aware of. You probably, if you're a self-releasing artist, you're probably set up with DistroKid or CD Baby or whatnot, or you're signed to a label, and then that's being managed that way. But there's a whole kind of package of other royalties which get a little bit, or they're a little bit hidden. They used to be. People are getting more aware of it. So the neighboring rights is this principal category, and it didn't exist for a number of years. It came into existence, this category of royalties, because of a lobby of performers and record label owners who wanted the right to earn revenue when their music was being played on the radio, generally. Up until 1997, before the existence of neighboring rights, when music was played on the radio, only the writers got paid for that broadcast royalty, so that performance broadcast royalty we mentioned that SOCAN collects. Up until that point, that was the principal way music earned revenue when it was broadcast on the radio. But with the successful lobbying of artists and record label owners, now that pie has been expanded to include performers are entitled to revenue, as well as the owners. And this one is because it was kind of created, I guess, in the era we are now, the era of the internet. It's still kind of figuring itself out. And I feel like it's still not quite as settled, whereas the mechanicals, well, maybe the internet's screwing with all the categories, I should say. But generally, this one is even less, people have less awareness of the nuances of this one. And it can be quite complicated. So we're going to break down how to manage this. And do you guys have any comments right off the hop?
I think one interesting takeaway is that we have this in Canada for the radio, like terrestrial radio. In the United States, they don't. So it's really a big difference from the way that Canada works versus the United States. And there's a lot of hopefully in our lifetime and sooner, or within our working careers collectively, the viewers and panelists, there'll be more equitable remuneration in the United States as well. But that's just a side comment on another reason to be happy to be here in Canada. Yeah,
so these are the organizations that manage the administration of neighboring rights royalties here in Canada. They have the capacity to collect internationally, and we're going to put an asterisk on that. Sound Exchange. So we're going to look at Sound Exchange coming up in a little bit. Probably a lot of the viewers are aware of Sound Exchange. And we're going to talk about the relationship between these organizations and Sound Exchange and the proper way to navigate this, because a lot of questions come up about this. So we've kind of we're on the master side. We're on the side governing royalties for the recording. And on this side, there's actually a split between the master owners, the people that own the recording, and the performers. And there's a sub-split on the performer side. So the master owners are entitled to 50% of the royalties. So this is from when music is played generally on the radio, digital broadcast, webcasting. In Canada, that's the package. As Byron was saying, that rule is not universally applied across the world because of dysfunction of copyright, as we mentioned way earlier, is not universally applied. And so America didn't sign the same agreement called the Rome Convention Treaty governing neighboring rights. And so they don't actually have the same kind of categories of neighboring rights as we have. But this split does exist generally across the world, let's say, in some form. And so key things are that you want to, if you're a self-recording artist and you're performing on the recording, you're going to have a bit of work here to do to take care of your royalties. So on the performer side, there's two categories. There's a featured performer, which in Canada earns 80% of the revenue earned from their share. Then there's also a category for non-featured musicians / session performers. So we'll talk a bit in detail about this as we go through this. And each of these categories, as you saw on the earlier slide, has agencies or organizations that collect. So we're going to look at the performer side right now. And this is a good talking point here for us to discuss. So the featured performer is generally a person that is, as far as I understand it, who is using the marketing materials of the recording, is a band member, or is literally featured in a track. Their name is featured in the track. Whereas the non-featured are performers who are background musicians who are not featured in the marketing materials, are not permanent band members. A lot of people ask me, Byron and Michael, can I get a better definition of this? Because this affects how people register their works. As we saw in our last week's presentation, you've got to identify your relationship to the recording and sign up with the correct societies. And understanding these two categories of performers is key to doing this. How do you guys define featured performer?
Well, I guess I'd say that a related concept is that everything is negotiable, meaning that it's a good idea for everybody involved to agree to their splits of this money. If there's a band, let's say of 5 people, generally the starting point is that there are no non-feature performers, there are no session performers, that everybody is entitled to 20% of the whole amount. If there's 5 people, 20% times 5 equals 100%. If they're, so I think that talking about a couple of scenarios can kind of illustrate the point. Let's say that Mike is a singer-songwriter, and it's only him on the recording. He's getting the full amount. If Stephen is playing on piano in the background, they might, the outcome is likely that Stephen's the non-featured performer, and Mike is the featured performer. So Mike gets 80% and Stephen gets 20%. I'd say, let's say Alex is coming in as a featured performer on this track. So it's like this song by Mike featuring Alex, and you have Stephen in the background playing the piano, or another instrument, or I'm sure you play many instruments. Likely the outcome is that Mike would get 40%, Alex would get 40%, and Stephen gets the 20%. That doesn't have to be how it's done. Introduce a producer, and the parties might agree that the producer is entitled to a certain percent of the featured performer share. So there's a variety of different scenarios, but generally speaking, the main kind of lead person or lead people are getting the featured performer part in whatever allocation they agree to, and everybody else is sharing equally the non-featured part. So if there's 3 session musicians, they're each getting, a third of 20%. If there's 20, they're each getting 1%. It's really, people, we don't really, collectively, we're not kind of telling the societies how the non-featured is split up. It's an even split among the people who are non-featured. But again, if Stephen, Mike, and everybody involved agreed, they might agree that Stephen gets 25% and Alex gets 20%. Like everybody gets an equal share. So it's all negotiable, but the starting point the default usually is that the main people involved get the featured performer part, and the people who are, let's say, like side musicians or like a background vocalist or someone playing a tambourine, collectively are getting the non-featured share.
Great, thanks.
It's not a science, but it's there's some considerations.
So in Canada, these royalties for performers are collected by MROC, Artisti, and racks or actor racks. So performers' shares are collected for both the featured and the non-featured by those organizations. And you can choose to, let's go back up a slide here. You can choose which one you're going to register with. So on the performer side, you have 3 options. Why do we have so many options? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it was a bit of a Wild West when this royalty came into being, and a lot of people tried to position themselves to be that organization to collect these royalties. And they all have come from various origins. But for you as an artist, if you're just looking at this stuff now, as a performer looking to get registered, you have an abundance of choice. Wasn't that wonderful? They all generally kind of do the same thing. And if you do want to, you can email me. I have a bit more information on how much they charge. They're all free to register. I should say this again. All the societies that we've discussed so far, SOCAN, CMRA, and now these selection for neighboring rights are all free to register. They take a commission. They take a small percentage, usually 15% and under, of the revenue that you'd earn to do the administration for you. So you can choose any of these, MROC, Actorax, or Artisti to handle your performer share, and they'll both take care of your non-featured and your featured, and they can do it internationally. Maybe we'll talk briefly about Connect here. So on the owner side, as we noted, there's a 50% of the revenue goes to the owners when a song is broadcast and earning a neighboring right. So we're talking about, again, a performance royalty that's for broadcast, but this is going now to the owners. In Canada, the 2 principal societies are Connect or SoapRock. Connect is affiliated with Resound, which is kind of like the central hub for receiving these royalties in general. But you can register with them directly, but I mostly direct people to Connect or SoapRock. What do you guys feel about registering correctly for the owner side of neighboring rights?
Yeah, so I mean, the other way to describe the relationship is that Resound is like the umbrella organization to all of these 5. I mean, the money does flow through Resound directly to these organizations, and yeah, they're definitely getting more into the game of registering directly. My experience is that most musicians I work with that are English speaking use MROC and Connect, or Actorax and Connect, and don't register directly with Resound. I have nothing against that. It's just definitely the more common way to proceed. But I'm not anti any of them, and leave it at that.
Yeah, there's some streamlining that happens by registering as an owner with Connect because if they redid how their relationship is with Resound, and you can actually save like 14%. By going with Connect, I believe, over SoapRock. SoapRock, please chime in if you're watching, because they don't have that with that relationship. So I am following Byron's advice. I'm with Rax for my performer side, and then I'm also an owner, so I'm registered with Connect. The registration is actually quite easy. I just want to say across the board here, once you do one of these registrations, you'll generally have a sense of how it all works. They're generally spreadsheets that you fill in all the information about your songs and you upload them. I remember Connects was particularly easy when I did it a few years ago. So these organizations do have the capacity to collect internationally for you. So they'll go out and get your neighboring rights from wherever your songs are being broadcast. Generally, it's digital, radio, satellite radio, webcasting, digital radio, and then terrestrial radio. And in certain areas of the world, actually, there are neighboring rights for even movies. So if your song is in a movie, there's a chance you could be earning revenue for that. And this is so as a performer, if you're a beat maker on a record, you're a performer. You might be featured performer, depending on your relationship. If you're just doing a vocal track on a recording, you are a performer. You may be a featured performer if you're the lead vocalist or if you cut the deal that way. If you're generally making a noise on a record, you probably are entitled to some kind of performance royalty or a neighboring right royalty as a performer. If you own the recording, then you're entitled to the owner's share. So that one's a little more clear, a little less fuzzy. So I want to jump to another category of neighboring rights here, or a different style of neighboring rights here, Sound Exchange. Sound Exchange are the organization that is managing digital royalties generally for America. And I would say Sound Exchange manage neighboring rights, but I don't know. Do you think these are neighboring rights, guys? Michael, Byron?
They're all kind of in the same bucket. So digital digital performance royalties, neighboring rights. The words kind of get mixed around. At the end of the day, whatever it's called doesn't really matter to the musician. It's who's paying out what from what kind of use. And yeah, the names you listed here are the big players. Sirius XM. In the States, they have Pandora. We don't have that here yet in Canada, maybe ever. But yeah, that's yes, all essentially the same kind of thing.
And so in the States, though, the Sound Exchange does both sides. They'll collect for you as a master owner. Like if you own your own recording, they'll collect for you. And they also collect for feature performers. But they don't collect for non-featured, which,
right.
But you can assign that for your Canadian aid organizations to collect for you. So what you can do here, you can mix and match. You can tell the organizations, like in Canada, I want to sign up Sound Exchange directly, and I want you to take care of the world, which is very common. What I see happening is a lot of artists are registering directly for their neighboring rights with Sound Exchange and giving Sound Exchange the right for the world. And I kind of put a red flag on that because the US is not part of the treaty that governs neighboring rights internationally. And though they've been trying, they're trying to get to access international neighboring rights royalties. They're not always successful. So I actually recommend that you just have Sound Exchange collect for the US for you. They can also collect your US private copying as well. So all those organizations in this category here are generally collecting your private copying royalties, which is a very small amount. There's a few tricks, though, for pulling off. If you want to do a direct registration with Sound Exchange, you can, like MROC, ActRex, Connect, etc. They can all collect your Sound Exchange money for you because it's just they're affiliated with it, or they have reciprocal agreement rather. But there are some red flags and a few tricks and tips. So one of the things I came across is I had a mandate conflict. So turns out I had ActRex was trying to collect for the US for me for a featured performer, and Sound Exchange was trying to collect for the US. And so there was a conflict there. So I had to resolve that. Those kind of things can happen. So you really want to make sure in this section, as I noted, it's a little complicated how you put things together mostly because there's so many options in the way you can do things. Maybe I'll leave it to you guys to talk a bit about these red flags here.
Yeah, so for withholding tax, the concept is that Sound Exchange will hold back a certain percentage of your royalties unless you submit one of these two first forms. A W-8-BEN is an IRS form for an individual, and a W-8-BEN-E form is a form for a company, like a corporation. And so long as you fill out that form, if you have questions about that, you can ask us after the fact. But if you fill out that form and you submit it, then there's no money being held back. And one of the advantages of working with organizations like MROC and ActRex and Connect is that they do it for you. You don't have to worry about these IRS forms. But it's really important to submit that form when you are submitting your information about the songs. So you want to do this tax stuff early so that you don't have an issue with money that you initially receive from Sound Exchange.
Yeah, thank you.
Michael, that's the key thing.
Yeah, so the other thing to remember too is that you're going to register for both sides. If you're doing a direct membership with Sound Exchange, if you're taking on this extra administration, you want to register for both as a performer and as the owner, if you own or are the owner of the recording. And then and I think this came from MROC, who helped me put this together way back in the day. So don't register the repertoire with different splits than in Canada. All these things can happen. If you make any mistakes here, you can end up with losing money, essentially. And some of it can go into that black box, which is why we have a little black box icon here. And maybe we should talk now briefly about the letters of direction and how that can work, because it can get quite tricky when you're kind of setting yourself up with Sound Exchange and establishing everybody's various relationships with the recording.
Yeah, and a letter of direction. The basic premise is that a letter of direction is signed by somebody. It's a letter that somebody signs asking an organization to pay some of the money that's going to me, pay to somebody else instead. I'm asking you, Sound Exchange, instead of paying me 100% of my entitlement, I want you to pay Mike 20% on this specific song. And so if Mike and I do a deal whereby, let's say he's my, hip hop producer and I'm the performer, and I'm saying, hey, I'm going to give you 20%. I might do that, but Mike might be a little concerned. He might not be too trusting that I will actually do that. So Mike will say, hey, Byron, can you just sign this letter which tells Sound Exchange that you want 20% to go to me? So Mike fills out the letter that I sign, whereby I am saying to Sound Exchange, please give 20% to Mike. It's a very, very, very common tool in the kind of ecosystem of hip hop music, especially where a featured artist or a producer are asking the artist to sign a Sound Exchange, a letter of direction, or an LOD meaning letter of direction. If it's SELOD, that's Sound Exchange letter of direction, more acronyms. But it can be a really good tool because, Mike has more incentive than me to actually inform Sound Exchange that 20% of the money going to me should instead go to Mike. A letter of direction can be done after the fact. And on the letter of direction, it can indicate when that 20% should start to be paid. If Steven's my producer for a whole album, and on every song we have a different percentage that Steven's getting, we fill out the chart and we say the song name and we say the percentage of each song. So they're very flexible, these documents, to allow you to give different percentages on different songs. And really a really good, learning experience is just Googling Sound Exchange letter of direction. And there's a whole package of information that Sound Exchange puts out, which explains in really good detail how you fill out a letter of direction, why you'd fill out a letter of direction. And again, I see it more commonly in hip hop space, but it can be used in really any genre when these royalties are being split between people.
Great. And so I want to ask maybe a pretty tricky question here when we're kind of talking about letters of direction. How do you establish your relationship with the recording if you're a hip hop producer and you're leasing a beat? You put that into your agreement? Are you seeing those producers, chase down this kind of nuance detail in their registrations?
This kind of a shout out to our session number 1 where we talked about beat leasing agreements and the challenges and opportunities with leasing beats. But whether a beat is being leased or is being purchased or is being whatever, if an artist is getting the right contractually to use an existing beat, then it's in the beat maker's interest to clarify, that person is entitled to a percentage of these royalties. And likely that would be something in one of those lease agreements or purchase agreements. And really, this is one of the 101 reasons why you want to read that agreement to make sure that it's reasonable. And so if the lease agreement says that the producer, the hip hop beat maker producer, is getting 100% of this money, I might say that's not very reasonable. But if the lease agreement or the purchase agreement says that the beat maker is getting, let's say, 25% of this money, of the featured artist share of Sound Exchange, then that's perhaps reasonable. And that agreement should also indicate, or usually does indicate, what percentage of the owner's share of Sound Exchange the beat maker is getting. So, it's really important to clarify, as between the creative collaborators, what everybody's entitled to receive, including, but not limited to these items regarding Sound Exchange. And if you don't know, you should ask. So I was looking at an agreement last night for an artist, and she had signed this distribution type of deal a while ago, and the company had registered the songs with Sound Exchange. And she emailed me and said, like, can they do this? And I looked back in my email, and I saw that I emailed her, a year ago saying, thanks for sending the agreement. What's the deal with Sound Exchange? Like, are they able to collect it or not? Anyway, the deal got signed without ever, that issue wasn't ever resolved at the time. And now this distributor is collecting Sound Exchange money. And I'm representing my client to say, no, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to collect it because of the way the agreement was. So, to kind of sum up, an agreement should clarify to what extent somebody is entitled to these royalties. And you want to make sure that whatever you agreed to in writing is what actually happens. Because sometimes people go after money that they're not entitled to receive. So there's kind of two relevant points. One is when you're figuring out your deal among your creative collaborators. And the second is later on when there's actually money being generated, if the money is being appropriately allocated based on what you agreed to.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, those royalties splits, which can get delineated or established in those agreements with your beat leaser, can affect all of these categories that we've gone over, because they can be contributed to the composition, so the publishing side, as well as the performer side, because they're performing on it, and then they perhaps could, because they're leasing it to you, have a share of the owner side. So it's something to keep in mind as you go through those types of deals. So we're coming towards the end of our presentation today. We're going to have a little wrap-up slide next, but some of we've got some takeaways for you here today. Register with the Right Society. Register your songs and recordings accurately. Review and update your catalog regularly, and contact each society and confirm there are no conflicts in your account. So this is something I've said before on these presentations. This is something, try to do this once a year. Like a housekeeping thing every spring, you're just going to do royalty cleanup. Just contact them, ask for your catalog, check that all the flow is going right. You never know, the little bumps in the road can happen and set you off on the wrong path. So you really want to make sure that you establish your relationship with that recording. You've got your splits sorted, and you register with the Right Society. So you're not going to remember, you're not necessarily registering for every society here. Okay, I once was at a panel and somebody had said, "Oh, well, you should register with all of them." And it's like, no, you're not registering with all of them. You're registering with the right ones, the ones that are suited to you and your relationship. If you're the songwriter, you're only the songwriter. You're just registering with SOCAN and or CMRRA for your mechanicals. If you are the recording owner, you're going to register with Connect and probably Sound Exchange if you want it, Sound Exchange Direct. If you're the performer, you choose one of those Canadian societies, MROC, RAX, or Artisti. And if you want to, Sound Exchange. You're choosing which ones suit you best. You want to keep it really simple. If you were just starting at ground zero today, my advice would probably be register with SOCAN, have them collect your performance and mechanicals. That's one thing you need to do. Performers, you're a performer on that same recording, let's say, or a recording of that song you made. You go to MROC or Actorax, choose which one you want to do. Most Anglophones choose one of those two. Register as a performer, have them collect for the world. And then as your owner side, go get Connect and have them collect for the world. And then 3 stops, you've got everything covered, and you can sleep well at night. And the trick is, when you get a new song going, you write a new song, you record a new song, you're going to have to do this process again as soon as it gets out in the world. Do you guys have any wrap-up comments, Michael, Byron?
Similar to what you're saying, it's all about creating a process and, rinse and repeat, keep doing it. You never know which song you're going to work on. That's going to be the one that, takes you to the next level. But if you have a process regarding, the items we talked about last time and the items we're talking about this time, it may, there may be some questions that come up the first time around, but once you do it once and twice and 3 times, it just becomes simple. And the other comment is that these organizations work for you. Every one of these organizations have people who answer the phone and email to answer your questions. And, they're being paid. You're paying them with the administration fees that, that they're charging. They pay people to answer your questions. So if you have any questions at any stage, all of these organizations, once you become a member of the relevant one, and then call them up or email them their membership services people to ask them any and all questions, because they do work for you from my perspective. Anyway.
Great. So Alex, do we have any questions that we should deal with here at the end? Oh, you're muted.
Perfect. Thank you, Isabella. So far it was really good. This was a very, very succinct presentation. I was really happy with the information that came across. I learned a few new things, or at least was reminded that there's a few things that I need to do some housekeeping on. So I was really excited about that. And I'm really happy that you guys got a chance to do that and clear up everything. So we started last week with music agreements of the law. We came back down. We've taken care of organization and rights and registration. So that's great. We're going to come back again for one more and kind of focus in on more practical stuff next week. But before we go now, the three of you guys have been so helpful. Do you want to give us a quick little goodbye from each of you and where we can find you guys online if any of our viewers want to, or any of the people who stream this after the fact want to get a hold of you guys? Why don't we start with Byron? What is the best way for someone to contact you if they need your services?
For sure. And before I say that, and thank you for having us here, I forgot to mention the legal disclaimer that this is not legal advice, but rather legal information. So better late than never. It was in bold here in caps, but I missed it. So I'm saying it now. But yeah, so to reach Mike and I, you can head to to Edwards Creative Law, whether Facebook, Instagram, or our website. And there's on the website, there's a lot of blogs that we've done on topics, including what we've talked about today, including one about neighboring rights. And there's a contact form on the site, and you just, say, hey, I want to have a chat about something, and we'll get connected that way. But again, Edwards Creative Law on all your favorite platforms. And thanks again for having us be a part of it. Looking forward to watching the session next week as well.
Definitely. Mike, it looks like Byron took care of where they can reach you guys. Do you had any final words that you wanted to say before I let you?
Yeah, no, he covered all the bases for kind of our firm and how to get in touch with us, like for any kind of legal information and conversations. I'm actually going to be in town in Winnipeg in February for the Breakout West conference. So I'll be running part of the one-on-one sessions. So if anyone wants to kind of have a chat or kind of talk about anything music related or otherwise, I'll be there for that, and happy to meet up with anyone then.
Awesome. And finally, last but not least, Stephen, where should people? Well, I guess we can go to the website. Why don't you tell them about that?
Yeah, you can chase me down, Stephen at mbfilmmusic.ca. So Stephen with a PH, STPHEN at mbfilmmusic.ca. I tried to put it in the chat, but I can't access the chat. Whatever, I'm blocked out. But yeah, you reach out to me if you have general questions. I'm happy to have a broad overview discussion of where you're at with your royalties and how they've been set up, and give you a little bit of my 2 cents on the best way forwards. And also, we have funding available for you. So if you are making a recording, we have our upcoming recording deadline, January 20th at 5 p.m. And we have rolling intake for our tour, video, and marketing program, which is still open. And happy to receive those inquiries regarding any grants, and want to thank again Isabella, Alex, and the crew over at Manitoba Music for putting these together.
Perfect. Just to follow up with what Stephen said, you make sure you can email him. He gave you the email address, but also check out the website mbfilmmusic.ca. Great resource there, and if you're a musician in Manitoba, you're definitely going to want to know about that. Another resource here is Manitoba Music. And we're at manitobamusic.com. My name is Alex. You can reach me at alex@manitobamusic.com, and I'll be happy to help you guys out with anything. Other than that, this has been phenomenal. I've been really excited with all the information that we got, and I'm happy that this is going to live online for people who are going to be able to access this great resource. So I'm sure this is not the last that you're going to see of any of these fine gentlemen in regards to providing us all with great information on music, and I hope we get another chance to connect. But for Byron, Mike, and Stephen, and myself, Alex Fanny, thank you for hanging out with us, and hopefully you learned something here. Make sure you can check out the website too, manitobamusic.com, and we have the MusicWorks heading there where it's going to have all of that information for you if you want to check out the past session or any of this. Anyways, have a great evening or a great day. It's still bright out, and if you didn't get a chance to eat your lunch, enjoy that and whatever else you have planned for the day. Thank you very much for tuning in, and
Thanks, everybody.
we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thank you.